My name is Harriet Winters, and at 73 years old, I thought I'd seen it all in this life. I was widowed 12 years ago when my beloved Frank passed away after 45 years of marriage. Since then, I had built a peaceful routine in my small beachfront cottage in Cape Cod, overlooking the Atlantic Ocean that Frank loved so much. Each morning, I would wake to the sound of seagulls, brew my coffee, and read the newspaper while the sun illuminated my living room. A simple but satisfying life. Everything changed 3 months ago, when a fall left me with a fractured hip. My doctor, Dr. Collins, insisted that I would need help for at least 6 weeks. My son Thomas, my only child, immediately offered to bring me to his home in Boston. Mom, we'll take good care of you. We have plenty of space. And Rebecca agrees. He told me over the phone with a voice that tried to sound convincing. Rebecca, my daughter-in-law of 15 years, had never shown much enthusiasm for me. She was an elegant woman, always impeccable, with an important job at a marketing firm and a smile that never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. But she was my son's wife and the mother of my grandchildren, Ethan, who was 12, and Sophie, who was 9. For their sake, I had always tried to maintain a cordial relationship. I remember perfectly the day I arrived at their house. Thomas came to pick me up from the hospital, loaded my suitcase into the trunk of his car, and drove in silence the 60 miles that separated Cape Cod from Boston. During the trip, I tried to start conversations about his children, his work, but his answers were short, as if his mind were elsewhere. When we arrived at their house, a beautiful 2-story residence in an exclusive neighborhood, Rebecca greeted us at the door with that superficial smile I knew all too well. "Welcome, Harriet," she said without embracing me. "Thomas, take your mother's things to the utility room. We've prepared that room for her." The utility room. I stood frozen at the entrance, with my cane firmly pressed against the floor to maintain my balance. The utility room was a small space next to the kitchen, with no windows to the outside, that they normally use to store old junk. I had seen it during previous visits. "Rebecca, I thought Mom would be staying in the guest room," said Thomas, slightly furrowing his brow. Rebecca let out a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Honey, we already discussed this. That room is being renovated for my home office. Besides, the utility room is closer to the kitchen and bathroom. It'll be more comfortable for her, more comfortable for me, or more convenient for them, to keep me away from the main areas of the house." I swallowed hard and felt my pride knotting in my throat. I didn't want to start off on the wrong foot. "It's fine, Thomas. Any room is fine," I said, though inside I felt a pang of humiliation. Rebecca nodded, satisfied. "Excellent. Now, Harriet, there are some basic rules to make your stay pleasant for everyone. The children have their routines, and we don't want to disrupt them. Breakfast is at 7, lunch at 1, and dinner at 8. If you need anything between meals, you can serve yourself. But please keep everything in order." As Rebecca continued with her list of rules as if I were a child on my first day of school, I saw my grandchildren peeking out from the hallway. Ethan with his curly hair just like Thomas had at his age, and Sophie with her big dark eyes and shy smile. I wanted to run to them and hug them, but my hip prevented me, and Rebecca kept talking. "And finally, Harriet, we try to keep noise to a minimum after 9. Thomas needs his rest for work, and the children have school." "Understood. Perfectly, Rebecca," I replied, trying to maintain my dignity. That night, lying in the narrow bed in the utility room, I heard through the wall as Rebecca spoke with Thomas in the kitchen. "It's only temporary, honey. 6 weeks maximum according to the doctor." "I know, but I don't like seeing her in that room. She's my mother. Thomas, we already discussed this. My office is a necessity for my promotion, not a whim. Besides, your mother is getting older. We should start considering more permanent options for her care." "More permanent options? What do you mean?" "You know, a residence for older adults where she can have medical attention, activities, people her age." "Rebecca, my mother is perfectly capable of taking care of herself. She's only here because of her fracture. For now." But she's 73, Thomas. We can't ignore that she'll need more attention as time goes on. And we have our own lives, our careers, the children. I didn't want to hear any more. I covered my ears like a frightened child. But Rebecca's words had already penetrated my heart like needles. For her, I was a problem, a burden that needed to be placed in the least bothersome spot possible. And my son, my Thomas, didn't seem capable of standing up to her. The following days confirmed my fears. Rebecca barely spoke to me, except to tell me what not to do. Harriet, don't touch the ornaments in the living room. They're very delicate. Harriet, please don't use the washing machine without consulting me first. Harriet, your medicines are cluttering the medicine cabinet in the main bathroom. Keep them in your room. Thomas spent most of the day at his office, and when he returned, he seemed to avoid being alone with me, as if he feared I would reproach him for something. The only moments of joy were when my grandchildren came back from school. Ethan, although he was entering that age when children begin to distance themselves from adults, always popped into my room to show me something. A drawing, a book, a new game on his tablet. And Sophie, my sweet Sophie, would sit beside me for hours while I told her stories about when her father was little. It was precisely Ethan who unknowingly first alerted me. One afternoon, while showing me his collection of baseball cards, he dropped a comment that froze my blood. "Grandma, is it true you're going to sell your house in Cape Cod?" I stared at him, not understanding. "Sell my house? No, dear. Who told you that?" Ethan shrugged. "I heard Mom talking to Dad about it. She said it would be better for everyone if you sold your house now that you're here." I felt as if I had been slapped. I had never considered selling my cottage. It was my home, full of memories of Frank, of my independent life. Moreover, it had considerable value, being located in a privileged area facing the ocean, a legacy I had planned to leave to Thomas and my grandchildren someday. "Ethan, that's not true. I'm not going to sell my house. I'm only here temporarily, until my hip gets better." The boy nodded, apparently relieved. "I'm glad. I like your house in Cape Cod. The ocean sounds nice at night." That night I couldn't sleep. Ethan's words kept spinning in my head. Why were Rebecca and Thomas talking about selling my house? I needed to understand what was happening. The next day, when everyone left, I got up with difficulty and, leaning on my cane, explored the house in search of some clue. I felt like an intruder spying in my own son's house, but something told me I needed to protect myself. In Thomas's study, I found unpaid bills, letters from banks with late payment notices, credit card statements almost at their limit. Apparently, my son had serious financial problems he had never mentioned to me. Next to these papers were brochures from various retirement homes, all marked with Rebecca's annotations. Single room, $1,800 monthly, requires initial deposit of $15,000, accepts patients with reduced mobility. My heart was pounding as I continued searching. Then, in a partially open drawer, I found something that took my breath away. A draft of a letter addressed to a real estate agent, written in Rebecca's elegant handwriting. "Regarding the property at 57 Ocean Drive, Cape Cod, we confirm our interest in listing it for immediate sale. The owner, Harriet Winters, 73, is currently under our care, due to health problems, and has expressed her desire to sell. As her son and responsible person, Thomas Winters will handle all necessary procedures." I couldn't read anymore. My address. My house. They were planning to sell my house without my consent. How could they even think of doing something like that? When I heard the front door opening, I quickly put everything back in its place and left the study, my mind spinning with questions and fears. That afternoon, while Rebecca was preparing dinner, I caught her talking quietly on the phone in the backyard. I approached stealthily until I was behind a lilac bush, from where I could hear without being seen. "Yes," Dr. Ramirez agrees. "He says we can present a case of incipient mental incapacity. She's 73. Some occasional confusion is normal at that age. No, it's nothing serious, but enough for Thomas to obtain power of attorney. The house is worth at least $300,000. maybe more with the current real estate boom in Cape Cod. Yes, it would solve all our financial problems immediately. I felt the world crumbling beneath my feet. Not only were they planning to sell my house, but they were trying to declare me mentally incompetent to do it without my consent. My daughter-in-law, the mother of my grandchildren, was conspiring to rob me of everything I had, and most painfully was Thomas involved. Had my own son accepted this despicable plan? I needed to know before deciding how to act. That night, during dinner, I carefully observed Thomas. He seemed tense, avoiding my gaze as he meticulously cut his meat into increasingly smaller pieces. Rebecca, on the other hand, was unusually animated, talking about a summer house she had seen in a magazine. It would be perfect for us, don't you think, honey? The children could swim every day in summer. Maybe in a year or two we could afford it. Or much sooner, I thought bitterly, if they managed to sell my house without my consent. I decided to cast a line to see what I might catch. Thomas, I was thinking about my cottage in Cape Cod. Maybe I should check that everything is in order there. It's been several weeks. I saw Rebecca and Thomas exchange a quick glance. Don't worry about that, Mom, Thomas replied in a too casual voice. I asked a colleague to stop by and check. Everything's fine. Still, I'd like to go personally. Perhaps this weekend you could take me. Rebecca dropped her fork, which made a jarring noise as it hit the plate. That's impossible, Harriet. Your doctor was very clear you need complete rest for 6 weeks. Barely 3 have passed. I could stay in the car while Thomas checks everything, I insisted. Mom, Rebecca is right. It's too soon to make that trip. Don't worry about the house. It's safe. The lie in his eyes broke my heart. My own son was involved in the plan to rob me. There was no doubt. That night, lying in my narrow bed, I made a decision. I would not be a passive victim. I had survived Frank's death, lived alone for 12 years, built an independent life when many women of my generation never did. I wasn't going to let them strip me of everything just because they considered me old and useless. The next day, while everyone was out, I called my friend Mildred, my confidant since we were children. I told her everything I had discovered. Good heavens, Harriet. Are you sure? Is Thomas really involved in something like this? Everything indicates that he is, Mildred. I never thought my own son could betray me this way. You need legal help immediately. My nephew Philip is a lawyer specializing in family law. He could help you, but I can't leave this house without help, and I don't trust Thomas to take me anywhere right now. I'll pick you up tomorrow. I'll say I'm taking you out for coffee, just 2 old friends catching up. That Rebecca won't mind getting rid of you for a few hours. And so it was. The next day, Rebecca almost seemed relieved when I told her Mildred would be coming to pick me up for coffee. It's good for you to socialize with people your age, Harriet, she said with that condescension that made my blood boil. Just make sure you're back before the children come home from school. We don't want to disrupt their routines. When Mildred arrived in her old Buick, I felt like a prisoner about to escape. My friend helped me into the car and, instead of going to a coffee shop, we headed directly to her nephew's office. Philip Baker turned out to be a man in his 40s, with shrewd eyes and a way of speaking that immediately inspired confidence. He listened to my entire story without interrupting, occasionally taking notes and nodding gravely. Mrs. Winters, what you're describing is extremely serious, he said when I finished. They're planning to commit several crimes: falsification of medical evaluation, fraud, elder abuse, misappropriation. The list is long. What can I do? I asked, feeling for the first time in weeks that I had an ally. First, we need to protect your assets immediately. Do you have access to your bank accounts? Yes. I have my card and passwords. I never share them with anyone. Excellent. We're going to transfer most of your funds to a new account that Thomas and Rebecca don't know about. We also need to review the legal status of your property and make sure nobody can sell it without your explicit signature. For the next 2 hours, Philip and I methodically worked to protect everything I had built in my life. We transferred money, contacted the bank to alert them about possible fraud attempts, called a notary to update my will, and even spoke with the manager of my building in Cape Cod to warn him not to allow anyone to enter without my explicit authorization. One more thing, Mrs. Winters, said Philip before we left. We need concrete evidence of what they're planning. Without evidence, it'll be your word against theirs, and unfortunately, courts sometimes tend to believe adult children more than elderly parents. What kind of evidence do I need? Recordings of conversations would be ideal. Written documents. Anything that clearly demonstrates their intentions. Mildred, who had been listening in silence, pulled a small black device from her purse. I have this. My son bought it for me to record my recipes because he says I always forget to write them down. You can take it, Harriet. It was a digital recorder, small and discreet. Perfect for what I needed. You should also have an escape plan, added Philip. If things get ugly, you need a safe place to stay. She can stay with me, Mildred offered immediately. Perfect. We'll maintain daily contact, Mrs. Winters. And remember, act normally. We don't want them to suspect that you're aware of their plans. When I returned to Thomas's house that afternoon, I felt different. Fear had been replaced by determination. I was no longer just an old woman at the mercy of her treacherous family. I was a woman with a plan. Over the next few days, I acted exactly as they expected me to. Submissive, occasionally confused, grateful for their generosity in taking me into their home. But beneath that facade, I was carefully gathering the evidence I needed. I placed the recorder at several strategic points. Under the desk in Thomas's study, behind a vase in the living room where Rebecca usually made calls, even in the pocket of my robe when I conversed with them. Each night, when everyone was asleep, I reviewed the recordings and saved them on a small USB drive that I hid in the lining of my pillow. And what I heard confirmed my worst fears. Rebecca, the real estate agent says it could be worth even more than we thought. The market in Cape Cod is booming. Thomas, but Mom will never agree to sell. She loves that cottage. Has all her memories with Dad there. Rebecca, that's why Dr. Ramirez is key. With his report on mild cognitive deterioration, you can apply for legal guardianship. After that, you can sign on her behalf. Thomas, I don't know, Rebecca. That's deceiving my own mother. Rebecca, and what alternative do we have? The bank is going to foreclose on our mortgage if we don't pay the last 3 months. We'll lose this house, the kids' private school, everything. Your mother has an asset she barely uses while we drown in debt. It's only fair. My heart shrank every time I heard Thomas hesitate but finally yield to Rebecca. She was the principal architect of this plan, but he was complicit through his weakness. One afternoon, while I was alone in the house, I decided to investigate more thoroughly. With my cane as support, I meticulously explored each room. In the master bedroom, hidden in the back of Rebecca's drawer, I found jewelry that I immediately recognized. The pearl necklace that Frank had given me on our 30th anniversary, the sapphire earrings that had belonged to my mother, the platinum watch that I had planned to give to Thomas when he turned 50. They had been stealing from me bit by bit, probably during my previous visits. Thinking that an old woman like me wouldn't notice or would attribute it to her failing memory, the rage I felt at that moment was so intense that I had to sit down to calm myself. I also found on Rebecca's computer that she had carelessly left on an email to Dr. Ramirez detailing the symptoms he should include in his report. Occasionally confused, sometimes doesn't recognize family members, difficulty remembering recent conversations. All lies, of course, but presented in a way that seemed like legitimate concerns of a son for his aging mother. That night during dinner, Rebecca announced that Dr. Ramirez would be coming to visit me the next day. It's just a routine checkup, Harriet, she said with false sweetness. Thomas and I are concerned about some small memory lapses we've noticed. What kind of lapses? I asked innocently. Rebecca and Thomas exchanged looks. Well, the other day you couldn't remember where you put your glasses, said Thomas, not meeting my eyes. And last week you confused our neighbor Mr. Jenkins with your late husband, added Rebecca. It was an outright lie. No such thing had ever happened. Oh, how strange, I said, feigning confusion. I don't remember that. See? That's exactly what concerns us, said Rebecca, barely hiding her satisfaction. Memory lapses about memory lapses are a classic sign. I suppose you're right, I conceded, lowering my gaze to my plate. Perhaps I do need to be checked. I saw the gleam of triumph in Rebecca's eyes. Her plan was working. The stupid old woman was falling into the trap. Little did she know that the one really being deceived was herself. That night, I called Philip from Mildred's phone, which she had lent me for emergencies. The doctor is coming tomorrow. They're going to try to get him to sign a false diagnosis of cognitive deterioration. This is perfect, said Philip. We'll record everything. If he admits he's writing a false report, we'll have irrefutable evidence. What if he forces me to sign something? Pretend to be confused. Sign as Harriet Peterson instead of Harriet Winters. Any discrepancy will give us more legal ammunition later. Dr. Ramirez turned out to be a man in his 60s, with a practiced smile and eyes that never settled on mine for more than a second. Rebecca insisted on being present during the evaluation, which consisted of basic questions designed to confuse even a perfectly lucid person. Can you tell me the exact date today, including the year? Can you count backward from 100 by sevens? Can you remember these three words? Apple, clock, elephant? I decided to play a dangerous game. I would answer some questions correctly and others not, showing an inconsistent pattern that would frustrate any clear diagnosis. The date? I think it's May 10th. No, wait, it's June 5th. It was actually June 16th. Count backwards? 100, 93, 86, 79, 72, 65. Perfect up to here. 58, 52, 44. Deliberate errors. The three words? Apple, clock, and I'm sorry, what was the third one? At the end of the session, Dr. Ramirez seemed slightly uncomfortable, but Rebecca took him aside. I couldn't hear what she said, but from her body language, she was pressuring him. When they left, I pretended to take a nap and then checked the recorder I had hidden in my pocket. The conversation between Rebecca and the doctor was exactly the evidence we needed. Rebecca, we need a clear diagnosis of cognitive deterioration, doctor, something that justifies legal guardianship. Dr. Ramirez, based on what I've seen today, it would be difficult to justify that. Her responses are inconsistent, but don't necessarily indicate significant deterioration. Rebecca, doctor, we already discussed this. The fee we agreed upon is for a specific diagnosis. Dr. Ramirez, I understand, but there are ethical standards. Rebecca, ethical standards won't pay for your children's college, doctor. The deposit is already in your account. I expect the full report tomorrow. The doctor left shortly after, and from Rebecca's satisfied expression during dinner, I knew he had yielded to the pressure. The next day, while Rebecca was at work and Thomas at his office, I received an unexpected visit. Sophie came home early from school. Due to a mild fever, the housekeeper left her with me while she prepared some tea with honey. My granddaughter cuddled up next to me on the small sofa in my room. Grandma, is it true you're forgetting things? Her question, so direct and genuine, broke my heart. What had they told this innocent child? No, my love, my memory is fine. I just have an injured hip that's healing. Mom told Dad that you were becoming like Grandma Julie before she went to heaven. Rebecca's mother had died of Alzheimer's a few years earlier. So that was the plan, to make me seem like her. Sweetheart, don't worry, Grandma is perfectly fine up here, I said, touching my temple. Sometimes adults get confused or misinterpret things. Sophie looked at me with those big, dark eyes so similar to Thomas's when he was little. I don't want you to go away, Grandma. Mom says you'll soon have to go to a special place where they take care of older people. I felt a pang of pain and anger. They were already preparing the children for my voluntary departure. Sophie, listen to me carefully. I won't go anywhere without properly saying goodbye to you and Ethan. And if I ever need to go somewhere else, we'll always find ways to see each other. Promise me? I promise, Grandma, she said, resting her little head against my shoulder. That small conversation strengthened my resolve. I wasn't fighting just for myself and my property. I was fighting for my relationship with my grandchildren, for their right to know the truth about their grandmother, for the integrity of our family beyond Rebecca's lies and manipulations. Dinner that night was particularly tense. Rebecca announced that Dr. Ramirez had sent his preliminary report, which unfortunately confirmed her suspicions about my cognitive state. Thomas seemed uncomfortable, but didn't contradict his wife. Ethan and Sophie looked at me with a mixture of confusion and sadness. Based on this, continued Rebecca, Thomas and I have decided that the best thing will be to look for a specialized place where you can receive proper care. Harriet. A nursing home? I asked directly. Rebecca grimaced at the word. A residence for seniors with special needs. A place where you'll be safe and well cared for. But you told me I would only be here for 6 weeks. Until my hip healed. It's been almost 4 weeks. And I'm much better. Mom, Thomas intervened with a soft voice. It's not just your hip. We're worried about these episodes of confusion and forgetfulness. You can't live alone under these conditions. In my house in Cape Cod? What will happen to it? I saw them exchange another quick glance. Well, since you won't be able to use it anymore, the most sensible thing would be to sell it, said Rebecca, with false compassion. The expenses of the residence won't be small, and that property sitting empty is a waste. I feigned an expression of alarm. But it's my home. All my memories are there. We know, Mom, said Thomas, taking my hand across the table. But sometimes we have to make difficult decisions for everyone's good. I promise, we'll look for the best possible place for you. When? I asked, my voice trembling. Not from fear, but from containing my indignation. We've arranged a visit to Sunset Gardens for this Saturday, continued Rebecca in an administrative tone. It's one of the best residences in Boston, with permanent doctors and activities for people in your condition. I lowered my gaze to my plate, pretending to be devastated while internally calculating my next move. Time was running out faster than I had anticipated. Could I at least visit my house one last time before selling it? I asked in a fragile voice. To say goodbye and perhaps collect some personal things? Thomas and Rebecca exchanged another of their complicit looks. I don't think that's a good idea, Harriet, replied Rebecca. The trip would be exhausting for you and could confuse you more. We can bring whatever you need. Besides, added Thomas, avoiding looking directly at me, we've already started organizing some things there. To prepare for the sale, you know. They had already entered my house. My blood was boiling, but I maintained my dejected and submissive expression. I understand, I murmured. I suppose you know what's best for me. I saw the relief on their faces. The old lady was yielding without a fight. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I called Philip again from Mildred's phone. They already have the falsified medical report and have scheduled a visit to a nursing home for this Saturday, I informed him in a low voice. And apparently they've already entered my house in Cape Cod without my permission. This is more serious and moving faster than we thought, said Philip. We need to act now. Can Mildred pick you up tomorrow morning? Yes, Rebecca has an important meeting, and Thomas will be at the office. Only the housekeeper will be here, and she leaves at noon. Perfect. We'll pick you up at noon. Bring all the evidence you've gathered. We'll go directly to the family court with all this. That night I barely slept, mentally reviewing everything I had discovered and gathered, the recordings, the stolen jewelry I had photographed, the email to the doctor, the conversations with my grandchildren. Everything pointed to a meticulous plan to strip me of my autonomy, my property, and my dignity. The next day, after Rebecca left in a hurry after reminding me not to touch anything in the kitchen, I pretended to be tired and retired to my room. In reality, I was carefully packing the essentials, my documentation, the evidence I had gathered, some basic clothing, and the few personal belongings I had brought. At 12:05, Mildred arrived punctually. The housekeeper had already left, and I was ready by the door with my small suitcase and my cane. Ready for battle, warrior? Mildred asked me with a fierce smile as she helped me into the car. More than I've been in my entire life, I replied with determination. Philip was waiting for us in his office with two other lawyers. The three of them listened attentively as I presented all my evidence, nodding gravely at the most incriminating recordings. "This is pure gold from a legal standpoint," Philip finally said. "We have clear evidence of attempted fraud, theft, falsification of medical documents, and attempted misappropriation, enough to file a formal complaint and request immediate protective measures." The following hours were a whirlwind of statements, signatures, and legal procedures. We filed a formal complaint against Rebecca and, with great pain in my heart, also against Thomas. We requested a protective order that would prohibit them from approaching me or my property in Cape Cod, and asked for an investigation to be initiated into Dr. Ramirez for falsification of medical report. "Where will I stay now?" I asked when we finished with the procedures. "I can't go back to that house." "You'll stay with me until we sort everything out," said Mildred, taking my hand. "My house isn't as fancy as your son's, but it has an ocean view, and no one will call you an old parasite there." I smiled, grateful to have such a loyal friend. "There's something else you should consider, Harriet," said Philip as we left the courthouse. "Your grandchildren. This situation will be very difficult for them." My heart sank. Ethan and Sophie, my little treasures. How would I explain all this to them? How would they understand that their grandmother had reported their parents? I need to write them a letter, I decided. Explain it in a way they can understand. I don't want them to think I'm abandoning them. That night, in Mildred's cozy house, I wrote the most difficult letter of my life. "Dear Ethan and Sophie, Grandma has had to go away for a while. Not because I don't love you, but precisely because I love you so much that I need to make sure you will always have a strong and honest grandmother in your lives. Sometimes adults make mistakes. Sometimes, even the people we love the most can make wrong decisions. That's what's happening now in our family. You won't understand everything today, and that's okay. I just want you to know that I will never abandon you, that I will always be your grandmother, no matter what happens, and that when you're older, I'll explain everything to you in more detail. For now, be good, take care of each other, and remember that I love you more than all the stars in the sky. With all my love, Grandma Harriet." I asked Philip to deliver the letter to my grandchildren, knowing it would be intercepted by Rebecca and Thomas, but hoping it would eventually reach Ethan and Sophie's hands. What I didn't expect was how quickly Rebecca would counterattack. The next morning, Philip called me with alarming news. "Rebecca has filed a countersuit. She claims that you're the one conspiring against them, that it's all a product of your senile paranoia, and that the recordings were manipulated. She also claims that the jewelry you say was stolen was actually lent to you by her because yours were outdated." "That's ridiculous," I protested. "I have all the original receipts for that jewelry, some from more than 40 years ago." "I know, and that will help us. But Rebecca is smart and very good at manipulating perception. She's gotten Dr. Ramirez to maintain his diagnosis, claiming that your erratic behavior of fleeing the house only confirms his concerns about your mental state." "And Thomas? What does he say?" There was an uncomfortable silence on the other end of the line. "Thomas has signed a statement supporting everything Rebecca says. He claims to be deeply concerned about your mental well-being and that everything they did was trying to protect you from yourself." I felt as if I had been stabbed. I knew Thomas was involved, but a small part of me hoped that, faced with the truth, he would reconsider and take my side. His betrayal now was complete and unequivocal. "What do we do now?" I asked, feeling the weight of years like never before. "We're going to request an independent psychological evaluation, conducted by court-appointed experts. We're also investigating Thomas and Rebecca's finances more thoroughly. According to my sources, they're on the verge of bankruptcy due to bad investments and excessive spending. That strengthens our argument that this is all a desperate plan to take over your property and my house in Cape Cod. I have good news on that front. The judge has ordered that no one can enter the property until the case is resolved, and we've changed all the locks. Your house is safe for now." The following days were a whirlwind of statements, counter-expert opinions, and legal meetings. I underwent exhaustive psychological evaluations, that confirmed what I already knew. I was perfectly lucid, with no signs of cognitive deterioration beyond what was normal for my age. Dr. Ramirez, faced with an investigation by the medical board, finally broke down and confessed to having been pressured by Rebecca to issue a false diagnosis in exchange for a considerable sum of money. This confession was a devastating blow to Rebecca and Thomas's credibility. Meanwhile, the investigation into their finances revealed an even worse situation than we had imagined. Thomas had lost almost all his money in speculative investments. They had 3 mortgages on their house, and their credit cards were maxed out. They were literally weeks away from losing everything. A week after my escape, I received an unexpected call. It was Ethan, using a friend's phone from school. "Grandma," he said, his voice breaking a little, "we got your letter. Mom didn't want to give it to us, but Sophie found it in her desk." "Oh, my boy," I replied, tears filling my eyes. "How are you two?" "Bad. Dad and Mom argue all the time. I heard Dad shouting something about losing the house. And they told us you're very sick in the head, and that's why you left." "Ethan, listen to me carefully. I'm not sick in the head. I'm perfectly fine. I left because, well, because sometimes adults need to resolve complicated things." "Is it true that you reported Dad and Mom to the police?" My heart sank. How could I explain all this to a 12-year-old boy? "There was a very serious disagreement between us," I said carefully, "about my house in Cape Cod, and about some decisions they made without consulting me. And yes, I had to seek legal help to protect myself." "Grandma, there's something you should know," said Ethan, lowering his voice. "I heard Mom talking to her sister on the phone. She said they were going to sell your house, even if you didn't want to, and that they'd use the money to pay off their debts. And that afterward they'd put you in a place for old people where no one would listen to you if you protested." A chill ran down my spine. The plan had been even more sinister than I thought. "Thank you for telling me this, Ethan. You're a very brave and honest boy. Can we see you, Grandma? Sophie misses you a lot." "Soon, my love. Very soon. For now, be strong and take care of your sister. And remember that I love you both very much." When I hung up the phone, my determination was renewed. I was no longer fighting just for my property or my dignity. I was fighting for my grandchildren, to show them that truth and justice mattered, that even at 73, a woman could defend herself against abuse and manipulation. I decided then that it was time to move from defense to offense. With Philip's help, we prepared a complete legal offensive. We would not only defend ourselves against Rebecca's accusations, but also demand compensation for emotional damages, defamation, invasion of privacy, theft of my belongings, and attempted fraud. The main hearing was set for 2 weeks later. During that time, Rebecca attempted a desperate maneuver. She sent Thomas to see me, supposedly to reconcile. I was surprised to see him at Mildred's door, with a dejected expression and deep circles under his eyes. "Mom," he said, almost in a whisper, "can we talk?" I let him in, but maintained my emotional distance. He was no longer the child I had raised with so much love. He was a man who had chosen to betray me for money. "Rebecca and I made a mistake," he began, sitting on the sofa, as if his entire body weighed him down. "We let ourselves be carried away by financial panic, but we didn't really want to hurt you." "No?" I asked with cold calm, planning to declare me mentally incompetent, stealing my jewelry, selling my house without my consent, locking me in a nursing home. "That's not wanting to hurt me." "Things got out of control," he admitted, running his hands over his face. "Rebecca started with this idea, and I was too weak to oppose her. You were always a good son, Thomas, until you allowed money to become more important than decency and respect toward your own mother." He remained silent for a moment, head bowed. "What do you want, Mom? What can we do to fix this?" "The lawyers say we could lose everything. The house, the kids' school, everything." So there it was. He hadn't come to genuinely apologize, but to save his financial situation. "The hearing will be in 10 days, Thomas. Everything will be determined there. Please, Mom, for the kids. They're not to blame for our mistakes. I thought about my grandchildren, about how this situation would affect them, but I also thought about the lesson they would learn, that dishonesty has consequences, that even older people deserve respect and autonomy, that family should be based on love and mutual respect, not exploitation. You're right about one thing, Thomas. The children are not to blame. That's why whatever happens to you two, I'll make sure they are protected, but you and Rebecca will have to face the consequences of your actions. He left shortly afterward, with slumped shoulders and without having achieved his goal, convincing me to withdraw the lawsuit. The day of the hearing arrived with an almost palpable tension. The courtroom was full, Rebecca and Thomas with their lawyers, Philip and his team with me, experts, witnesses, and even some journalists who had heard about this case of elder abuse that was capturing media attention. Rebecca had dressed soberly, projecting the image of a concerned daughter-in-law and responsible mother. Thomas looked like a defeated man even before the battle began. I chose a navy blue suit that Frank had always loved, carefully styled my hair, and walked to the witness stand without my cane, although my hip still ached slightly. I wanted everyone to see that I wasn't a fragile and confused old woman, but a strong, dignified, and perfectly capable woman. The hearing was long, and at times painful. All the evidence was presented: the recordings, the falsified documents, the stolen jewelry, the independent psychological evaluations confirming my full mental capacity, Dr. Ramirez's confession, Thomas and Rebecca's financial records showing their desperate economic situation. Rebecca maintained her story until the end, insisting through tears that everything she had done was out of genuine concern for me. Thomas, on the other hand, finally broke down during his testimony. Yes, we knew my mother was perfectly lucid, he finally admitted, ignoring Rebecca's glaring looks. We needed the money from selling her house to save ours. Rebecca devised the plan, but I agreed to it. I betrayed her for money, and there's no excuse for that. His confession was the final blow to their case. The judge, a woman in her 60s with penetrating eyes and a severe expression, issued her ruling that same afternoon. Having considered all the evidence presented, this court determines that Mrs. Harriet Winters is fully capable of managing her assets and making decisions about her life. The allegations of mental incapacity presented by the defendants are categorically rejected. Furthermore, this court finds Rebecca Sanders and Thomas Winters guilty of attempted fraud, falsification of medical documents, theft of personal property, and psychological abuse against an elderly person. The immediate return of all property taken from Mrs. Winters is ordered, along with payment of compensation for moral damages, and a restraining order is established prohibiting the defendants from approaching Mrs. Winters or her property without her express consent. Additionally, Dr. Ramirez's case is referred to the medical board for appropriate sanctions, and the district attorney's office is informed about the crimes proven here for possible criminal charges. When the judge finished speaking, I felt a contradictory mixture of emotions: relief at having been vindicated, sadness about my son's situation, and constant concern for my grandchildren. What would become of them now? Rebecca quickly left the courtroom, completely ignoring me. Thomas briefly approached, with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I didn't know what to say. Words seemed insufficient after everything that had happened. I simply nodded and watched him walk away, wondering if we could ever rebuild something of what we had lost. The following weeks were a process of recovery. I returned to my cottage in Cape Cod, which I found intact, thanks to the judicial intervention. I hired a security service for greater peace of mind and began to reorganize my life. The hardest part was not seeing my grandchildren. According to Philip, Rebecca and Thomas were facing serious financial and legal consequences. They had had to sell their house and move to a much more modest apartment. Thomas had found a new job with a considerably lower salary, and Rebecca was having difficulty finding employment after her reputation was tarnished by the case. A month after the hearing, I received a call from Ethan and Sophie's school. The principal, a kind woman named Mrs. Carter, wanted to meet with me urgently. When I arrived at the school, Mrs. Carter explained the situation. The children were suffering. Their grades had dropped. Sophie had begun to isolate herself socially, and Ethan had had several incidents of aggression. They're caught in the middle of a situation they don't fully understand, explained Mrs. Carter. The move, the changes in their parents' financial situation, and especially not being able to see you, is deeply affecting them. What can I do? I asked, my heart constricted. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't get involved this way in family matters. But I've known Ethan and Sophie since they were little, and I only want their well-being. Would you be willing to meet with them here at school? I've spoken with Thomas, and surprisingly, he agrees. Rebecca is more reluctant, but hasn't directly opposed it. Of course, I responded without hesitation. Whenever you want. 2 days later, I found myself in a small meeting room at the school, nervously waiting. When the door opened and my grandchildren entered, I felt my heart flip over. Sophie was the first to react. She ran toward me and threw herself into my arms, sobbing. Grandma, I missed you so much. Ethan stayed at the door for a moment, as if evaluating the situation. He had always been the more cautious one, the one who thought before acting. Finally, he approached, and to my surprise, also hugged me tightly. Are you okay, Grandma? Are you really not sick in the head like Mom said? I'm perfectly fine, my love. Just a normal grandmother with her normal age-related aches and pains. Then why did Dad and Mom say all those things about you? Why did they want to sell your house? I sighed, searching for the right words to explain something so complicated to children their age. Sometimes when adults have big problems, especially money problems, they can make very wrong decisions. They can convince themselves they're doing the right thing, even though deep down they know it's not. Mom says you're mean and vengeful, said Sophie with the direct honesty of children. But I don't think you're mean. I'm not mean, sweetheart. I just defended myself when they tried to take away my house and my things. Just like you would defend yourself if someone tried to take away your toys or your favorite books. Ethan, always more analytical, asked, will we ever live together again? Will we still be a family? The question broke my heart. We will always be family, Ethan. That will never change. But sometimes families need time and space to heal when painful things have happened. With time, we'll find a new way to be together. We spent the next hour talking, playing, and simply enjoying being together again. I promised them that, with their parents' permission, they could visit me in Cape Cod on weekends, and that I would always be available by phone for them. When it came time to say goodbye, Sophie clung to me tightly. I don't want you to go, Grandma. I'm not going forever, my love. Now that we've found each other again, I'll always be present in your life. I promise you. As I was leaving the school, I was surprised to find Thomas waiting in the parking lot. He looked different, thinner, with several days of beard growth and simpler clothes than he used to wear. Mom, he said in a tired voice, can we talk for a moment? We sat on a nearby bench. For several minutes, neither of us knew what to say. Finally, Thomas broke the silence. Rebecca and I are separating, he announced. After everything that happened, we just couldn't continue together. I didn't feel the satisfaction I might have expected at this news. Just a deep sadness for my grandchildren, who would now face another loss. I'm sorry for the kids, I said sincerely. Me too. But maybe it's for the best. Rebecca, she always had this obsession with appearances, with maintaining a lifestyle we really couldn't afford. I let myself be dragged into that, and we ended up destroying everything. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he'd had since he was a child when he was nervous. I don't expect you to forgive me, Mom. What we did, what we did to you was unforgivable. But I want you to know that I'm trying to rebuild my life in a more honest way. For the kids, mainly, I felt a small sprout of hope. Perhaps, after all, something good could emerge from this painful experience. Forgiveness takes time, Thomas, but you'll always be my son, and Ethan and Sophie will always be my grandchildren. We'll find a way through this. Somehow. Before we parted, Thomas asked me a question that took me by surprise. How did you do it, Mom? How could you stand up to us, fight so hard at your age when it would have been easier to give in? I thought about my life, about everything I had faced and overcome over the years. The early death of my parents, the economic difficulties during my youth, raising Thomas practically alone while Frank worked long hours, and finally, facing widowhood and solitude. Because I learned a long time ago that dignity is priceless, Thomas, and that life, regardless of age, is always worth living on your own terms. The following months brought gradual but significant changes. Thomas found a small apartment near the children's school and obtained shared custody. Rebecca moved to another city, apparently to restart her life away from the scandal. My grandchildren began to visit me regularly in Cape Cod. They loved the sound of the ocean, the walks along the harbor, the stories I told them about their grandfather Frank and about Thomas when he was a child. During one of those visits, Ethan asked me a question that made me reflect deeply. Grandma, are you happy now? After everything that happened, are you content? I took a moment to think about my answer. Was I happy? The betrayal of my son and daughter-in-law had been a devastating blow. The legal battles had been exhausting. I still felt pain when I remembered some of the things they had said and done. But I had also discovered strengths I didn't know I had. I had defended my dignity and autonomy. I had shown my grandchildren that a 73-year-old woman could still fight for what was right. I had found loyal friends like Mildred and Philip, and now I was rebuilding my relationship with my grandchildren, and little, even with Thomas. Yes, Ethan, I finally replied. It's not a perfect happiness, because life rarely offers us that. It's a happiness with scars, with painful memories, but also with pride in having defended what was right. And above all, with gratitude for having you and Sophie in my life. Upon turning 74, I decided to do something I had been considering for months. Establish a foundation to help older adults who faced situations of abuse or financial exploitation by their families. With part of my savings and the compensation received, I created Silver Dignity, a place where other seniors could receive free legal advice, psychological support, and a community that backed them up. Thomas, in a gesture I interpreted as a genuine attempt at redemption, offered to collaborate with the foundation in his spare time, contributing his financial knowledge. It was a small step toward rebuilding our fractured relationship. One day, while walking on the beach with Sophie, my granddaughter stopped to pick up a particularly beautiful shell. Look, Grandma, it's perfect, she exclaimed, showing me a mother-of-pearl shell that shimmered with the colors of the rainbow under the sun. It's beautiful, my love. Do you know what it reminds me of? Us, our family. Why? It's just a shell, she replied, confused. Because this shell has survived storms, the constant pounding of the waves. Who knows how many years at the bottom of the sea? It has small cracks and marks from everything it has faced. But it's still beautiful, perhaps even more beautiful precisely because it has survived all that. Sophie looked at the shell with new eyes, gently passing her finger over the small cracks and marks. Like us, she finally said, we've gone through difficult things, but we're still a family. Exactly, my treasure, exactly like that. As we continued our walk along the shoreline, I thought about the long and painful path I had traveled, about how my family's betrayal had almost destroyed me, but also about how finding the strength to defend myself had transformed me in unexpected ways. At 74, I had learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to reinvent yourself, to find new purposes and joys. Life continued to offer me challenges and gifts, pains and pleasures, lessons and surprises. My name is Harriet Winters, and this is my story. A story of betrayal and forgiveness, of loss and recovery, of discovering that even in the darkest moments, there is always room for light. 5 years have passed since those turbulent days. My hair is now completely white, my step a little slower, but my spirit remains as strong as ever. My Silver Dignity Foundation has helped hundreds of seniors defend themselves against abuse and exploitation. Each resolved case, each person who regains their autonomy and dignity, is a small personal triumph. Thomas has changed profoundly. The painful process we went through transformed him in ways I never would have imagined. He left the corporate world and now works as an administrator in a nursing home, where he applies his financial knowledge to ensure that residents are treated with respect and that their assets are properly protected. He visits me every week, sometimes alone, sometimes with the children. Our conversations have evolved from tense discomfort to a new form of intimacy, based not on mutual idealization, but on the honest recognition of our flaws and strengths. Rebecca remarried and moved to another state. The children visit her during school vacations. According to Sophie, who is now 14 and possesses a wisdom that goes beyond her years, Rebecca never talks about what happened, as if that part of her history simply didn't exist. Ethan, at 17, is planning to study law. "I want to defend people like you, Grandma," he told me recently. "People whom nobody listens to, because they think that being older means they no longer have a voice." Mildred remains my rock, my confidant, the sister I never had. We grow old together, sharing afternoons of tea, memories, and laughter. Philip continues to advise my foundation pro bono, making our cause part of his professional legacy. A few months ago, while organizing my closet, I found the old recordings I had made during those dark days. I listened to them again, reliving each moment of humiliation and pain, but also each instant of courage and determination. When I finished, I made a decision. It was time to let them go. In a small private ceremony on my terrace, with the Cape Cod Sea as witness, I destroyed the recordings and scattered their fragments to the wind. It wasn't an act of automatic forgiveness or forced forgetting. It was an acknowledgement that those recordings had already served their purpose. They had protected me, helped me obtain justice, allowed me to keep my home and my dignity, but I no longer needed to carry the weight of those memories constantly present. I could recognize what happened without letting it define the rest of my life. On my 79th birthday, Thomas organized a small celebration in my cottage. Sophie had prepared a cake. Ethan brought music, and to my surprise, several of the seniors we had helped through the foundation also attended. As I observed everyone gathered, animatedly conversing in my living room with a view of the sea, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. It wasn't the life I had imagined when Frank and I bought this cottage so many years ago. It wasn't the quiet and predictable old age I had expected. It was something more complex, richer in nuances, with visible scars but also with new connections and purposes that I would never have discovered if everything had followed a conventional path. One afternoon, while Sophie and I were baking cookies in my kitchen, my granddaughter asked me a question that took me by surprise. "Grandma, if you could go back, would you change anything about what happened?" I stopped kneading for a moment, seriously considering her question. "That's a difficult question, my love. Of course, I would have preferred not to suffer that betrayal, not to have to fight for what was rightfully mine. I would have liked your father never to have been influenced in that way." I paused, seeking the exact words to express what I felt. But if I changed all that, I also wouldn't have discovered my own strength. I wouldn't have created the foundation. Your father might never have found a job where he really helps others. You and Ethan wouldn't have learned certain important lessons about dignity and justice. And many older people we've helped would still be suffering in silence. Sophie nodded, thoughtful as she cut the dough into star shapes. "I think I understand. Sometimes bad things can lead to good things, just not in the way we expected." "Exactly," I smiled, amazed by her insight. "Life is rarely perfect or terrible. It's usually a complex mixture of both. The trick is not to let the bad destroy you, and to find ways to transform it into something meaningful." That night, after everyone had left and I found myself alone again in my cottage, I went out to the terrace to contemplate the ocean under the moonlight. The same ocean that Frank and I had observed together so many times. The same ocean that had witnessed my pain and my recovery. I thought about all the women of my generation who had been silenced, stripped, ignored simply for growing old in a world that doesn't value the wisdom of years. I thought about how my small personal victory had transformed into something bigger than myself. Life, I realized, is like the ocean before me. Sometimes calm, sometimes stormy, always changing, but with an underlying constancy. The waves come and go, some gentle, others destructive, but the ocean itself remains, adapting, absorbing, transforming, but never disappearing. At almost 80 years old, I've learned that aging doesn't mean fading away or becoming irrelevant. It means having the opportunity to use all the accumulated wisdom, all the scars and victories, to leave the world a little better than we found it. My house in Cape Cod remains my refuge, my sanctuary, but it's no longer just a place of memories from the past. It's also a space where the future is created, a future where I hope my grandchildren and all who come after will understand that respect and dignity have no expiration date, that each stage of life has its own value, and that it's never too late to defend yourself, to reinvent yourself, to find a new purpose. This is my story, a story that began with betrayal but continues with hope, a story about the last treasure that truly matters. Not properties or jewels, but the human dignity that no one has the right to take away from us, regardless of our age. And as the sun sets over the Cape Cod horizon, coloring the sky with shades of orange and purple, I smile at the certainty that, whatever happens tomorrow, I have lived this part of my life on my own terms, with courage and authenticity. And at the end of the day, what more can a woman of almost 80 years ask for? What more can any of us ask for?